When a journalist suddenly aimed sarcastic remarks at Barron Trump during a charity art auction, no one anticipated that his calm response would become the focal point and capture everyone's attention. If this story has resonated with you, please share it with your friends to spread the message of respect and compassion. Don't forget to leave a comment or review below. Every bit of feedback helps us improve and bring you more meaningful content. And if you'd like to keep receiving inspiring stories, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss any future updates. That evening, the Eden Cultural Center's art gallery was more dazzling than ever. Crystal chandeliers cast a sparkling glow against elegantly painted cream walls. Contemporary paintings and sculptures were carefully placed on pedestals around the main hall, all set to be auctioned off to raise funds for children born with severe illnesses. Gradually, guests filled the space, their sophisticated attire blending with spirited conversations about art, the charitable purpose of the event, and the social networking typical of high society. At the registration area, each attendee received a catalog listing the pieces to be auctioned, along with an invitation to participate in the bidding and support the cause. The atmosphere was almost indescribably captivating, solemn yet heartwarming, as though everyone wished to unite in helping these less fortunate young lives. Barron Trump entered quietly through the large doors leading into the hall. Tall and composed, he made his way to the seats that had been arranged for him. Amid the crowd of warm smiles and polite greetings, Barron maintained his familiar air of reserved calm. Though he was only 18, he had attended numerous high-profile events, but still preferred avoiding the spotlight. Following an usher's guidance, he took a seat in the middle row, where he had a clear view of the entire gallery. Occasionally, Barron glanced around, pausing to admire the bold colors of modern paintings and the metaphorical depth of the sculptures, his curiosity sparked by the art world he seldom had the chance to delve into. He was curious why this particular evening had drawn so many celebrities and esteemed collectors. For Barron, this wasn't just another fundraising event, it was also an opportunity to quietly observe and learn something new about how people come together for a humanitarian purpose. The microphone hummed softly, signaling the start of the evening. The host gave an overview of the artworks to be auctioned, each carrying its own story and created by artists from around the world. What they all shared in common was that every dollar raised would go to the Guiding Star Foundation, a fund dedicated to covering surgical and treatment costs for children born with life-threatening illnesses. Sitting alone among the expensive suits and glittering evening gowns, Barron smiled slightly when he heard the MC mention that a painting can carry more than just aesthetic value, it can also bring hope to someone in a hospital ward. Right then, applause erupted from his right, causing him to look over. It was the well-known journalist Barron had heard about through his satirical articles on Barron's father. The man was walking over, chatting cheerfully with a group of businesspeople, but occasionally glanced in Barron's direction. Barron couldn't help feeling a bit tense. Still, he reminded himself to stay calm and focus on the main purpose of this night, to help the fragile children in need of medical aid. Though he suspected he might become the target of some sharp remarks, he hoped the event would unfold with the kindness it was intended to have, so that the children waiting for a miracle through the community's generosity would gain renewed faith in tomorrow. The auction kicked off in an air of excited anticipation. Older art collectors in classic suits carefully examined each painting. Younger faces, including artists and designers, snapped selfies, posting them on social media in the hopes that the event would go viral. While waiting for the official auction to begin, clusters of guests started discussing the artistic or symbolic value of the pieces on display. Amid the bustling crowd, Barron Trump made his way toward the juice station, taking a small sip as he tried to maintain a calm demeanor. Although he had attended plenty of public events before, he always felt more at ease in quieter corners. Yet tonight, his instincts warned him something was bound to happen. The sense of tension only grew when he spotted journalist A.C. Newfield across the room, smiling broadly while chatting with a group of businesspeople. Upon catching Barron's eye, Newfield subtly raised his glass, part greeting, part hint of something more. Moments later, the MC appeared at the microphone stand, inviting everyone to take their seats and announcing the start of the auction. The first few paintings were presented, and bids quickly climbed, punctuated by the sharp tap, tap of the auction gavel each time a final price was settled. The atmosphere was charged with excitement. Everyone was keenly aware of the event's philanthropic purpose. Every dollar raised would go to the Guiding Star Foundation, which supports children suffering from life-threatening congenital illnesses. Barron watched silently, heartened by how readily people were spending large sums for a noble cause. Everything proceeded smoothly until the MC invited Newfield to give a brief chat with the audience before moving on to the evening's most significant pieces. Applause followed, yet Barron noticed a hint of unease among some guests, aware of Newfield's knack for hitting sensitive nerves. Poised like a seasoned speaker, he strode up, adjusted his collar, and flashed a confident smile. "Ladies and gentlemen," Newfield began, "it's an honor to be part of this special auction tonight. As we all know, the Guiding Star Foundation brings hope to children who have been fighting illness since birth, a truly noble mission." He paused, scanning the room to ensure he had everyone's attention. What more can be said about contemporary art? Oh, perhaps it's more interesting to talk about certain celebrities who'll drop millions of dollars on a painting, or build a gold-plated tower. Mentioning gold-plated, he made a theatrical glance in Barron's direction. A few nervous laughs mixed with soft shushing noises in response. "Speaking of gold," Newfield continued, lowering his voice as though sharing a secret, "I'm reminded of a certain famous figure, a former president everyone knows. He's partial to lavish things, gold-plated statues, flashy buildings. And of course, we can't forget the young heir who was raised within those golden walls. Someone rather tall, if memory serves." Many eyes immediately shifted toward Barron. He could feel his heart rate spike. These words were no longer just allusions, they struck directly at him and his family. Observing the crowd's response, Newfield feigned regret. "It's unfortunate how people assume that being born with a silver spoon means you never have to worry about anything. But ask yourselves, does that teenage boy, son of a high-profile real estate mogul, truly grasp the struggles of the children we're here to help? In other words, has he ever had a single hard day that would make him appreciate every dollar donated tonight?" The room grew still, so silent you could hear people breathing. Even guests who didn't know Barron personally felt uneasy at the bluntness of Newfield's remarks. Barron bit his lip, trying to remain composed. Though he'd read many satirical pieces about his family before, such a direct confrontation at a charity event was unsettling. Clearing his throat, the journalist continued, "Don't get me wrong, I fully support anyone, rich or poor, contributing for the kids. But I think it'd be far more interesting if we had some concrete proof. For instance, that certain Trump lad could place a bid this very evening, proving his generosity doesn't just come from daddy's wallet. Wouldn't you all agree?" Ignoring the murmured disapproval from the audience, Newfield pressed on. "Or, if he's not interested, perhaps just a modest sum so these children know, yes, I was born into wealth, but I still feel your pain." A wave of discomfort spread across the room. For some, this had crossed the line of humor. Near the entrance, a few people began to move, some seemed ready to leave, while others hesitated, waiting to see what would happen. The host looked visibly uneasy, lightly tapping his fingers on the podium, seemingly considering how to cut off the journalist. Barron felt the turmoil inside him reach its peak. Every word from Newfield seemed to ignite suspicion among the crowd. Was he decent enough to act, or was he just a privileged rich kid living in an ivory tower? Until now, Barron had never thought he needed to prove anything, especially not at a charity auction. But at that moment, he suddenly wanted to stand up, to do something to put an end to the insults. Newfield ended his string of attacks with a half-joking, half-serious remark, "I don't intend to hurt anyone, I just want people to see that sometimes those with the most privilege show the least responsibility. Hopefully, tonight will be an exception." The stage lights remained on Newfield, but all eyes in the room were now on Barron. Some were clearly angry on his behalf, while others were curious, waiting for his response. Slowly, Barron stood up and placed his glass down. He wasn't sure what he would say, he only knew that if he continued to sit still, the mockery would likely escalate, and the auction, which was meant to support children with life-threatening illnesses, would turn into an ugly takedown. He took a deep breath, clenched his hands slightly to steady himself, then decisively walked toward the stage. Barron walked forward at a steady pace, the stage lights now illuminating every expression on his face. The room was so silent that the soft sound of his shoes gliding across the polished floor could be heard. Newfield, still holding the microphone, hesitated slightly upon seeing Barron approach. A few guests in the front rows subtly leaned forward, as if preparing for a tense confrontation. Maintaining his composure, Barron stopped a few steps away from Newfield, his eyes locked on the journalist with an unreadable expression. In that moment, the contrast between the 18-year-old and the seasoned journalist became strikingly clear. On one side, Barron with his quiet and composed demeanor, on the other, a sharp-tongued reporter known for his biting words. And now, they stood face to face under the lights, fully exposed to the curiosity of the entire room. "Good evening, sir." Barron's voice rang out, not loud, but strong enough to cut through the heavy atmosphere. He tilted his head slightly in greeting, maintaining a respectful demeanor. "I understand that you have doubts about whether I truly care about the children in need. And I realize that you might think I'm just a privileged kid living in a gilded bubble, isn't that right?" Newfield pressed his lips together, hesitating. Perhaps he was debating whether to maintain control of the moment or let Barron speak. The audience below was almost holding its breath. They expected a heated exchange, but there was something about Barron's presence that suggested he had not stepped forward to fight. "First of all," Barron continued, "I want to thank everyone here. The Guiding Star Foundation will give so many children a chance to receive treatment sooner and better. None of these children were fortunate enough to choose the life they were born into, and no child ever wishes to endure suffering from illness at such a young age." He turned toward the audience, and his voice grew stronger, as though sharing a deeper thought. "I understand that some may believe my words tonight are nothing more than hypocrisy, that a boy who has never known hardship has no right to speak about the struggles of others. But I want all of us, including you, Mr. Newfield, to remember one thing: my wealth or privilege does not determine whether or not I have a heart." A few guests nodded in agreement. Newfield raised an eyebrow, his expression shifting slightly. For the first time, perhaps, he was seeing Barron Trump take a stand and speak openly about the assumptions surrounding his own life. "Mr. Newfield," Barron turned back to face the journalist directly. "You questioned me. Has Barron ever had a difficult day in his life to understand these sick children? I don't need to have lived through the exact same hardships to empathize. All I need, and all we need, is compassion. And as for proof, you want to know whether I am willing to share, don't you?" At this, Barron paused, scanning the room as if searching for the event coordinator. He raised a hand, signaling, and a staff member hurried over. Leaning in, Barron spoke in a low voice, asking a few quick questions before nodding in confirmation. A flicker of surprise and excitement crossed the organizer's face. "I will place a bid," Barron announced firmly, his voice carrying across the entire hall. "A special contribution. I want to use my money to purchase all the essential medical equipment needed for the most urgent surgeries identified by the Guiding Star Foundation. The artwork I want to win tonight is the recovery of these children." A few seconds of stunned silence followed. Then, suddenly, the entire room erupted into applause. Emotion surged, shock, admiration, and even relief, as the sharp remarks had finally been answered not with anger, but with meaningful action. The furrow on Newfield's brow slowly eased, replaced by an expression of unease mixed with newfound respect. Barron met his gaze with quiet determination. "Mr. Newfield, thank you for initiating this conversation. Because of it, I now have the opportunity to prove that I have always cared about these children, not because of who my father is or how much wealth I was born into, but simply because I believe it's the right thing to do. But I also want to say this: words have immense power. Instead of using them to criticize or mock, we can use them to call for support, to inspire compassion. And I believe that is the true purpose of tonight's charity auction. A stronger wave of applause erupted, lasting for several seconds without pause. In an instant, the audience's perception of Barron had completely shifted, from a timid young man being mocked to someone who embodied clear ideals and genuine goodwill. The host beamed, stepping forward as if eager to seize this beautiful moment to reinforce the evening's true message, that the greatest meaning of this event was not money, nor fame, but compassion. Standing beside Barron, journalist Newfield seemed to be composing himself. Though his ego remained, he could not deny the weight of Barron's response. He lifted the microphone and cleared his throat slightly. "I must admit, I didn't expect things to unfold this way. Perhaps I should relearn the power of words from this young man. Because, as he rightly pointed out, words can either build or destroy." In the final silence of the applause, Barron responded with a small, polite nod. The charity auction had reached its peak in that very moment, when an 18-year-old faced sharp-witted satire and chose to engage not with hostility, but with responsibility and compassion. The applause slowly faded into scattered cheers before settling into a hushed admiration. On stage, Barron Trump and journalist A.C. Newfield stood side by side in a moment that was both slightly awkward and deeply significant. Everyone recognized that the evening had taken a completely different turn. What had begun as harsh criticism was now shifting toward understanding and a shared commitment to charity. Sensing the opportunity, the host quickly approached Barron and Newfield, his voice filled with enthusiasm. "A heartfelt thank you to both of you, especially to this young man who has shown us a beautiful message of kindness." Then, turning to Barron, he asked, "Would you like to share more about how you plan to support the Guiding Star Foundation?" Barron nodded slightly and faced the audience, who watched his every movement with anticipation. "I want to fully cover the costs of urgent surgeries that the fund is currently lacking resources for. If there's any remaining money, I hope the fund will use it to purchase additional medical equipment, medication, or even simply improve the treatment environment for these children. I'm not an expert, but I trust that Guiding Star Foundation will know how to allocate the funds properly." The applause rose again, this time not as loud but deeper and more prolonged, reflecting a profound sense of approval. Some guests even stood up, showing their admiration. In the back rows, a few businesspeople began whispering among themselves, discussing the possibility of making additional contributions to join forces with Barron. Many were beginning to realize that this young man's heartfelt action was the very inspiration they needed to transform the auction from a mere marketplace for artwork into a beacon of hope for the children in need. Standing beside him, Newfield shifted slightly, looking somewhat uncomfortable. Raising the microphone, he spoke slowly, "Barron, I admit that I crossed the line. And I also admit that you surprised me. Even when I provoked you, you didn't respond with anger or retaliation, you proved yourself through real action. That is admirable." His voice had softened, now devoid of sarcasm. "I apologize for turning a charity night into a stage for my own agenda. I hope everyone understands that sometimes I use sharp humor to highlight injustices, but tonight, perhaps it was misplaced." His apology was met with approving applause. Some guests exchanged serious but forgiving looks with Newfield. After all, he had come to recognize the true significance of the event. Barron, too, gave a slight nod, a silent acknowledgement that he did not intend to hold on to resentment or escalate the conflict further. Sensing that the atmosphere had now returned to its intended purpose, the host took the opportunity to officially resume the auction. This time, the guests engaged even more enthusiastically, as if their passion had been reignited after the powerful exchange they had just witnessed. The next paintings and sculptures were presented, and the bids escalated rapidly, driven by donors and now inspired by Barron's actions. The most unexpected moment came when an elderly businessman sitting in the front row confidently placed high bids on 2 expensive pieces. Grinning, he picked up the microphone and said lightheartedly, "I can't let that young heir be the only one doing good tonight. I have to chip in too." Laughter rippled through the room, followed by yet another round of applause, this time filled with warmth and a renewed sense of purpose. About an hour later, the final artworks were sold, and the last bids were sealed. The attendees congratulated one another and the organizers, as if this had not just been an art auction but a night where compassion had truly taken center stage. As the auction officially came to a close, Barron stepped down from the stage, weaving through the crowd toward a quieter corner of the gallery. Along the way, several guests stopped him to shake his hand, offering words of appreciation and admiration for his maturity. Barron responded with a modest smile, feeling a sense of relief that everything had ended peacefully. Yet, in the back of his mind, he still hoped that somewhere out there, the children in need would soon receive the help they deserved. As for Newfield, he stood quietly beside an abstract painting, lost in thought. Perhaps he hadn't anticipated that this evening would shift his perspective on Barron Trump. Someone passing by patted him lightly on the shoulder, offering a knowing glance. It seemed that the audience, too, acknowledged his public admission of fault, hoping that from now on, his sharp wit would find more fitting targets rather than being directed at a young man simply trying to do good. The stage lights dimmed, marking the end of a remarkable auction, not just in the total amount raised for the Guiding Star Foundation, but in the valuable lesson it had imparted, that kindness speaks louder than criticism. Outside, the last guests trickled out of the Eden Cultural Center, their silhouettes illuminated under the soft glow of streetlights. Shadows stretched across the sculptures adorning the entrance, lending an air of quiet reverence to the night. A few event staff lingered, packing up and checking the lighting and sound equipment. The auction had ended, but its impact lingered in the hearts and minds of those who had witnessed it. Barron Trump made his way toward the exit, accompanied by a few friends who had just arrived to pick him up. As he stepped outside, he noticed a small group of reporters already waiting, likely drawn by the news of his unexpected confrontation with journalist Newfield. Though feeling a bit drained, Barron remained polite, pausing to answer a few questions as camera flashes flickered around him. He reiterated his key message, "I don't believe I did anything extraordinary. I simply believe that children battling serious illnesses deserve help. And even though I come from a family that sparks a lot of debate, I hope people see sincerity rather than just speculation." His brief yet honest response was more than enough for the media to craft their headlines. A few minutes later, Barron maneuvered through the crowd and slipped into his car. Settling into the warm interior, he finally began to relax, watching the steady flow of traffic outside. His mind replayed the events of the night. It was the first time he had chosen to speak out in the face of a public attack, and not just at any moment, but at a high-profile charity event. Yet, things had not ended in hostility or resentment. Instead, he and Newfield had, perhaps unexpectedly, delivered an important message about how people should treat one another, especially in moments that call for compassion. Meanwhile, inside the now emptying hall, journalist Newfield slowly gathered his scattered notes. He scanned the room, which was now occupied only by a few staff members tidying up. Without the buzz of laughter or the blinding flashes of cameras, he finally had a moment of quiet reflection. He recalled the moment Barron had stepped onto the stage, his unwavering gaze, his steady composure, devoid of anger. For the first time in a long while, Newfield felt a flicker of shame for having used cutting humor to test the young man. Yet, at the same time, he also felt a strange sense of relief. Barron had not lashed out, nor had he retaliated with sharp words. Instead, he had chosen to respond through real, tangible action. "Perhaps that's what I've been missing all along," Newfield muttered under his breath. The instinct to act rather than argue. With that, he tucked his notes into his bag, exhaled softly, and stepped out of the hall, where, just moments ago, thunderous applause had filled the air. That very night, images and videos from the auction began circulating across social media platforms. Many were impressed by the way Barron accepted the challenge and turned it into a motivation to help children in need. "This is a responsible young man," one Twitter user commented. Another discussion gained traction: do we sometimes forget that the children of celebrities also have thoughts, emotions, and compassion? On the other side of the debate, some skeptics dismissed it as just a PR stunt, but such comments were swiftly countered by others who reminded them that Barron's donation would have a tangible impact on sick children. As for Guiding Star Foundation, the foundation's leadership released an official statement, announcing that the total funds raised during the auction had exceeded expectations significantly. They also extended a special thank you to the young Barron Trump for his extraordinary contribution, which would cover surgeries and medical treatments for the most critical cases. After a turbulent evening, the Eden Cultural Center returned to its quiet state. But the story of Barron Trump and the way he handled public mockery continued to spread. Rather than being overshadowed by controversy or a bitter exchange, it became a testament to a different kind of response, one that stood firm in defending oneself and one's values without tearing others down, all while promoting a greater cause. And perhaps, the compassion that had always been within this young man had, in the end, transformed the criticism into something far more powerful, a charity auction that would truly make a difference.